Welcome, and thank you for joining us to celebrate the fifth anniversary of Hostage US. I'm so proud of the work we've done in just 5 years, and I'm looking forward to continuing to see where our services grow. With your support, we've helped over 85 families. Families just like mine, like yours, like any regular family, but one faced with the unimaginable loss of not knowing when they'll see their father, their sister, or their son again. We hope that one day our services won't be necessary, that we'll live in a world free of hostage taking. But until then, we stand by, ready to walk with families through the worst times in their lives and help them to rebuild when they get out the other side. Today, you'll hear from board members, family supporters, and government officials. But nothing will be more important than the stories of the families who take on a second full-time job when their loved one is taken hostage, who fight every day for the freedom of their loved one while they try to manage their own lives here in the States. Or the stories of former hostages who, after having everything taken from them, have to build back the foundation and start rebuilding their lives. Hostage taking can be a long crime. It can be drawn out over years. It brings unique challenges to the families that require unique solutions. It's heartening to see how many generous and kind people are willing and wanting to step up to help and find solutions for these families facing some of the most desperate and challenging situations that any person and any family can go through. Please consider digging a bit deeper tonight to celebrate 5 years of our support, and please donate your time or money. We are also holding a silent auction for 100,000 American Airline Air Miles, which can get you and a guest anywhere in the US or Europe. The auction will end at 9 p.m. Eastern tonight. If you haven't already made a bid, check your email for the information and get your bid in. A few days ago, I had the chance to catch up with Rachel Briggs, our founding executive director, and talk a bit about the past 5 years and where Hostage US is going in the future. I want to thank you for your interest in the issues that we care so deeply about and hope that you enjoy the conversation that I had with her. Hi, Rachel. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so pleased to be able to share this joyous fifth year anniversary of Hostage US with you. For everyone who doesn't know, Rachel Briggs is the founding executive director of Hostage US, and I'm really pleased to be able to have this conversation with you.
It's really good to join you. Thanks for having me.
So, Rachel, tell me a little bit about 5 years ago. What was going through your mind when you decided to come here and set up Hostage US?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing. It's 5 years ago. Happy birthday to Hostage US. I'd been working with Hostage UK for probably well over a decade before I moved over to the US. And we had set up as a British organisation to help British hostages and British families. But what we soon found very quickly after we were established was that families were coming to us from all over the world because we were the world's first support service for hostages and their families. And many of those people who came to us were indeed Americans. There was no language barrier. We were able to work together. And so it started to dawn on us that really there was a need in America that wasn't being met. I then had the opportunity, along with Hostage UK colleagues, to take part in President Obama's review of American hostage policy, which was triggered in 2014 after the tragedies in Syria. It's fair to say that the US government realized that while they needed to get their own house in order, which indeed they now have, they also needed there to be a more independent organization that could work alongside families to help them through this tragic ordeal. So 5 years ago, as I was packing my suitcase, boarding the plane, I knew there was an unmet need, and it was great to finally have the chance to get to the US and start helping Americans in the way that we had successfully with Brits and many other nationalities.
Yeah, absolutely. And having started with you just a few months after, I could see the gap that we were filling as an organization. So tell me a little bit about when you came over here and when we started Hostage US. Tell me a little about when you felt like you were fulfilling the mission, when Hostage US was making an impact, the impact that you wanted to make when you landed here 5 years ago?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have to say it was pretty much day one. And if I'm being absolutely honest, it was even before I arrived. In the months leading up to touchdown in Washington D.C., families, government officials knew that this was coming and were already reaching out. So it was literally from day one when I arrived. And the fact that we already had, I think, about a dozen cases ongoing before we even had a website speaks volumes about the very important need that we were meeting. So I would say since day one for sure, but probably slightly before that. And in terms of impact, it was just wonderful knowing that from one day to the next, suddenly these families didn't have to go through it on their own. They had somebody who would be walking alongside them, an organization that had all the resources, all the partnerships that they could possibly need to draw on. And to know that we had bridged that gap was really a tremendous feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those 12 families that you had been supporting from the UK, and when you moved over to the US, I saw it as well, but it continued to increase. The caseload continued to increase as we move forward. And it was really pretty spectacular to see, honestly, that these Americans who didn't have anywhere to turn for independent support and ongoing support really had pretty much instantaneously, because of your experience with Hostage UK, a really solid support system moving forward.
I learned a lot of new American phrases very quickly when I moved to the US from the UK, and one of them, which became absolutely seminal to my everyday language, was somebody told me about this American phrase. It goes something like, "Flying the plane while you're still building it." I'm probably making a hash of that, but it absolutely felt like that. The need was so desperate, so pronounced. And as you know from experience, Liz, as people came to us, we were creating new programs, creating new partnerships. We really couldn't move fast enough.
And we had a lot of good days in the office. We had a lot of hard days in the office, and continued to have both good and very hard days. I'd really be interested to know, though, what are some of your highlights from the years that we worked together? What are some of the best days that you had in the office?
Yeah, and there were so many. I think a lot of people assume that this is very difficult work. It's very sad work. It's very trying work, and it is. It's all of those things for sure. But it's incredibly rewarding, and there were so many good days in the office. And obviously the best of those were when we learned that a hostage had been released, and we sort of had a big old high five moment and celebrated. And there's nothing better than that. I think for me, one of the most rewarding things was the setting up of the partnership with Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, our first hospital partnership. I knew from experience working with former hostages in the UK that on surviving captivity, they then have to go on and survive survival. And you can't rebuild your life if you haven't first rebuilt your body. And to be able to get that partnership and running, and you will remember, Liz, because you were so seminal in this, that first former hostage that we had go through that program up in Boston. And hand on heart, I mean, it's one of the best professional experiences I can look back on, to know that this young guy who'd been through something dreadful and unimaginable was able to go to the world's finest hospital, see physical therapists, get his blood checked, get anything that he needed sorted, to make sure that he could start his recovery from day one and with the best possible care. It was, I'm sure that's probably amongst your highlights too.
Yeah, I look back on that moment where we built the partnership and had the procedures in place with Massachusetts General, and then the call came where we needed them, and they got into action in about 24 hours, I'd say, and we flew the family there on American Airlines, another one of our partners. So it was just a really nice culmination of all of this work we had done to build up these partnerships for the specific need. And to see him be able to go through a series of medical appointments and come out the other end with a long-term care plan was, just heartening and really just exactly what we're here for. So that was a fantastic moment. And you'll remember that we actually supported another member of his family during his captivity as well, which is, kind of nice to be able to see that side of it throughout and walk through the whole experience of having a loved one kidnapped. And, we supported them with emotional help, resources. We brought them to DC and attended meetings with government officials with them as well. And then to have that person come home and be able to help him in such a way was truly rewarding. I would absolutely agree with you. That was one of the best days, weeks, months in the office, and being able to share that with you and the family was just incredibly rewarding.
And two other things just occurred to me from what you've said. Number one is it was a real reminder to me yet again, the quality of the volunteers that we have, because I remember his family members support her, absolutely insisting that she dropped everything to be in Boston with them, because she knew how much they would both need support through all those hospital treatments. And you reminded me of the American Airlines partnership, just the very unique way that Hostage US pieces together, a bit of help from here, a bit of help from there, and wraps it around hostages and their families like a lovely, practical, warm blanket to get them through, is a real sort of unique thing about the service that Hostage US offers.
Thinking about kind of where the organization is going as well, it's a really nice way of putting it is, that we kind of think of it holistically in terms of the support for families and former hostages. And there's a lot of background work that goes into that, and a lot of, prepping partners and making sure that we have the resources in-house before something happens. So, as I think about where the organization is going and where I hope to grow with the organization is exactly there. And it's building our partnerships and identifying where these families are having repeat needs and, where we can build up our resources so that families, when they're faced with this very unique challenge, they have all of the information that they need to go off of. So I think, from that experience and building on other experiences that we've had supporting hostages and their families, thinking about the partnerships that we create is, kind of key to where our support's going. And it's, heavily relying upon the volunteers that you just mentioned, those who are very, very supportive of the families and also Hostage US. It's relying on the pro bono partnerships who offer these professional services as well.
Yeah, I mean, it really does take a village, take a town, take a country. I mean, it's a tremendous team effort in every sense of the word. So, Liz, tell me, what's next for Hostage US? Where are you taking the organization next going forward?
That's a really, really good and important question. And, I think 100% of what we do is dependent on the family's needs and what we see those needs to be at the moment that we're supporting them. And I think you put it really nicely before that, we look holistically at the person and the family that we're supporting and try to bring in partnerships and different areas of support from, different groups and professionals that we have partnerships with. So what I would really want to see is growth of our partnerships to offer pro bono support to families. I really want to continue to fill in the gaps as we see them and create resources, both written, video, and podcasts for families on specific issues that they're facing. Ideally, what we would like to see is that no family goes through this alone. So I would, really want to focus on increasing our footprint and our presence in the issue and also, just in the world of hostage taking, that we are known to be an organization who is here for supporting the families and solely supporting the families throughout the case.
And having been in your seat previously, I can absolutely vouch for the fact that every single penny goes right towards the mission. I can't think of an organisation that's better value for money, to put it another way, and really would urge anybody that has the means to dig deep, dig a little bit deeper, and help Hostage US. There really isn't a better cause that I know of.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with me. It's always an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your continued interest and engagement with Hostage US. It's just amazing to see you and to know that you're here supporting us. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and happy birthday.
It's a pleasure to join you today. As the COVID-19 pandemic continues to run its course, I truly hope you are hanging in there and staying safe and healthy. My acting career has taken me all over the world, to places with a range of security issues, including kidnapping. Most people and businesses don't consider the possibility of kidnapping and don't prepare for the risk. As you can imagine, having a loved one taken hostage is an incredibly difficult experience to live through. In fact, right now, there are at least 48 publicly known hostage and detainees cases involving Americans. Their families face unimaginable hardship and challenges as they fight to secure the release for their loved one, many times in secret and in isolation, especially during this pandemic. The struggles don't always end when a hostage is able to return home. Often they and their families are confronted with a whole new set of challenges that require immense support. I support the mission of Hostage US because I know the importance of family and the value of having a support system in place when you are going through something so traumatic. I invite you to join Hostage US and thank you for your much needed support of their mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, for those kind words and for your support. I'm so pleased to welcome Ambassador Roger Carstens, who serves as a Special Presidential Envoy of Hostage Affairs. Having held positions in the Army Special Forces, at an international NGO, and as a top government official, Ambassador Carstens has unique and insightful approaches to the issues that he faces as a Special Presidential Envoy of Hostage Affairs. I am so pleased to see the continuity through administrations. With that, I want to welcome Ambassador Carstens.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roger Carstens, and I'm the Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs. On behalf of the Biden-Harris administration, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and the Office of the Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs, or as we call it, SPIHA, I would like to thank Hostage US for their kind invitation to speak to you all today. I'd also like to thank those in the audience who have formed what we refer to as the Hostage Recovery Enterprise, a partnership that is comprised of the departments and agencies of the US government, the US Congress, non-governmental organizations, third-party intermediaries, media professionals, and, most importantly, the families of all those held hostage or wrongfully detained. Without all of your efforts over the past decade, my office would not exist, nor would we have registered the many successes that we have shared together. If you're hearing my voice today, you are a member of this family, this enterprise, built on the hard-learned lessons of the past, but ever striving to better this special public-private partnership. Before we begin, I would also like to offer my gratitude and respect to the family members of those held hostage or who are wrongfully detained. Your courage and resilience inspires me, and I want to commit to you that this enterprise will never stop in its efforts to bring your loved ones home and to support you with better accountability, transparency, and communication. Now, that was a long introduction, about 1/3 of my remarks. but I felt that it was important to recognize the existence and membership of our recovery enterprise. The fact that we communicate and work together and that we partner, truly partner, is an amazing accomplishment, but our work is far from complete. Today, we're at an inflection point in the work that we are doing together. A confluence of recent and ongoing events will, in my opinion, offer us an unparalleled opportunity to take an exponential leap forward in accomplishing our essential tasks, which are bringing home those held hostage or who are wrongfully detained, taking care of their families, and dramatically increasing the capabilities and efficiency of the hostage recovery enterprise. The conditions for this upcoming evolution have been set by three things: the 5-year hostage policy review, the passage of the Robert Levinson Hostage Recovery and Hostage Taking Accountability Act, and the advent of a new administration. Taking advantage of this confluence of events will require energy, perseverance, communication, and creativity. But the progress that we've all made together over the past few years has positioned us well to capitalize on this window of opportunity. For starters, the 5-year hostage policy review conducted by the National Counterterrorism Center and the 2020 review, led by the Foley Foundation, identified the gaps and seams in our efforts and provided recommendations that will be used to build a roadmap to meeting the challenges that were identified. Now, it may have been painful to look in the mirror and honestly evaluate where we are coming up short, but I can assure you that we are better for undergoing this reflective process. Secondly, the passage of the Robert Levinson Hostage Recovery and Hostage Taking Accountability Act, or Levinson Act for short, is in itself a major milestone in the institutionalization of our collaborative efforts. Named in honor of the much respected former FBI special agent and much loved family man, Robert Levinson, this landmark legislation was introduced by the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Robert Menendez, co-sponsored by Senators Rubio, Leahy, Coons, and Shaheen, and supported by a bipartisan effort in the House of Representatives, led by Congressman Ted Deutsch. The bill, passed into the law in December of last year, codifies some of the foundational aspects of President Obama's 2015 directive, articulates the evaluation criteria for determining the status of those detained overseas, strengthens our relationship and communication with Congress, supports the expansion of family engagement activities, and provides for a sanctioning authority that can be used to target those who would wrongly deny freedom to our fellow Americans. In short, this act honors the memory of Robert Levinson by strengthening our ability to bring back those held hostage and who are wrongfully detained while providing enhanced support and care to their families. Thirdly, the changing of administrations offers us a unique opportunity to recalibrate and integrate our efforts into the policy and strategy reviews being conducted by all members of the U.S. government. I know the change of administration was a stressful time for everyone, not knowing whether we would lose hard-built momentum or maintain the support of U.S. government senior leaders. I think that you now can all recognize the importance that the Biden-Harris administration has placed on our work, and that Secretary Blinken has made our effort his priority. Within a week of taking office, he met with the families to relay that very message, and further stated that he supports the full implementation of the Levinson Act. Within the month, the Secretary had endorsed a multilateral effort with 57 other countries in a declaration standing against arbitrary detentions. The Secretary's embrace of what we're trying to accomplish here has been echoed by departments and agencies across the U.S. government. In short, I can assure you that this administration is committed to the efforts of this enterprise and to providing the support that we need to achieve our goals. I would like to close by returning to where I started and express to you my thanks. Thanks for the honor of addressing you today. Thank you for allowing me to serve you in my capacity as SPIHA. And most importantly, thank you for all that you are doing as invaluable members of this team. I will end by committing to you that we will continue to take care of families, we will continue to build this enterprise by implementing the Levinson Act, and most importantly, together, we will bring our people home. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dave Commandant, Board President for Hostage US. Thank you for joining us today to celebrate the Hostage US 5th anniversary. I personally got involved in the organization by chance after a colleague asked if I might be able to help a local hostage family. I knew nothing about the organization or their mission prior to the call, but after a brief but life-changing meeting with this family, it became impossible to not become more involved and to want to help where we could. I would like to highlight and thank our top sponsors of this event. Without their help, we would not be able to deliver the world-class support for hostages and their family. Our leadership sponsor, Doublewood Farm, was exceptionally generous, and our platinum sponsors, the Boeing Company and Global Medical Response. Thank you all for stepping up and showing incredible generosity. In addition to our leadership and platinum sponsors, we want to thank our gold, silver, and bronze sponsors. Your contributions ensure that families of hostages and wrongful detainees are not alone as they navigate this terrifying experience. During the pandemic, so many of these impacted families have been cut off from seeking help for themselves and for their loved ones in captivity due to the limitations placed on all of us. Their suffering has been compounded by this isolation. The assistance your sponsorships provide have been critical to their well-being. We are grateful for your ongoing support. I would like to thank our founding partners, the James W. Foley Legacy Foundation and Hostage International, along with all of our pro bono partners who offer much needed professional services for families free of charge. Hostage US is an organization that walks in when it feels like the rest of the world has walked out. As we all recover from a long and difficult year, the Boeing Company wanted to think about how we could further support the mission of Hostage US and better enable the organization's efforts to provide these critical services to families in need. Because Boeing believes so strongly in the mission and the difference it makes for hostages and their families, I'm proud to announce today that in addition to platinum sponsorship of today's event, Boeing will match every dollar raised during this event and for the next week, thanks to Tim Keating, Executive Vice President, Government Operations, who you will hear from next. Please join us in our support of Hostage US and donate what you can. Thank you for your generosity, and we hope you all enjoy the event.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to celebrate Hostage US's 5th anniversary and the incredible work that you do to support hostages and their families here in the United States and abroad. This is an organization that steps into the worst kind of crisis to provide hope and relief. When loved ones have nowhere else to turn, Hostage US is there. They're there as a resource to ensure that hostages and their families can be reunited once again. Boeing has been proud to support Hostage US since its founding, and we will continue to support this critical mission so that no hostage or their families suffer in silence. Congratulations to Hostage US on this important milestone, and thanks for what you do.
Hi, I'm Dana Shell Smith. I served for 25 years in the State Department, mostly in the Middle East. And of course, in my time there, got to witness a number of cases involving American hostages. My last assignment was as ambassador to the state of Qatar, where I had the challenge and the privilege of working on a number of cases personally. And both as a human and as a mom, as a wife, as a daughter, I was deeply touched by the horrific pain that the families go through when their loved one is so far away and usually unable to communicate and in worse than terrible circumstances. And I found myself sometimes frustrated by the limitations of what government could do for these families. And so once I left government, I got involved with Hostage US. And I'm so grateful to Hostage US for filling that gap in the human side and the support to the family side that government simply can't and doesn't do. And I think other speakers, other people will be talking about some of the specific things that Hostage US does, but it's one of the things that I'm involved in that I feel most passionate about. I mean, anyone who can imagine your own loved one being held somewhere foreign, far away, where you can't touch them or know if they're okay or speak with them, it's really unimaginable. So I thank everyone who works with our organization, whether it's giving your time or your expertise or your money, because all of these things do cost money. And I thank all of our donors and partners who make everything that we do possible. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't also say that if you can dig a little deeper or if you haven't contributed before, it goes only to the most important and best work that one human can do for another. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana, for those kind words and for your support of Hostage US. I'm so grateful for everything that you've done for us. I'm thrilled to have Elizabeth Whelan speak next. Elizabeth is the sister of Paul Whelan, who's been illegally detained in Russia since December 2018. In addition to her work as an artist and creating beautiful masterpieces, she and her family members have taken on the challenge of getting Paul home. Thank you, Elizabeth, for joining us today and for sharing your story.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Whelan. I am the sister of Paul Whelan, who is being held by the Russian Federation. I'm an artist, and this is my studio on Chappaquiddick Island, Massachusetts. I want to thank Hostage US for inviting me to speak today, and thank all of you for being here. Your presence and your interest are a comfort to families of hostages and detainees. I am going to share with you a little of our experience. I have been advocating in DC for my brother from the first week of his wrongful detention, and over time I have come to rely on partners like Hostage US to an extent I never could have foreseen. Here's why. Paul Whelan has been held in Russia for over 2 years. I'll never forget that phone call from our mother telling me that he was missing, whereabouts unknown, in Moscow. Then the relief and dread when we found out he was alive, but under arrest. It was December the 28th, 2018, the day the iron bars crashed down around us all. Paul is enduring isolation and imprisonment in a Russian gulag. We are enduring the challenges that come with advocating for a loved one in DC. It feels like we are on a spinning hamster wheel where the days have a horrible sameness and where the goal is always out of reach. We run and run and run until we are crying and heartsick. We can never stop running, never stop. Day in and day out, we are tethered to our brother's imprisonment, to his jailers, to those trying to care for him, and those who have the power to negotiate for his freedom. Along the way, there are words we learn to repeat, roles we learn to play. One such phrase I've already used, advocate for our loved ones. What we mean when we say that is that we are begging, pleading for anyone to help. We are not just advocating, we are on our knees. We are supplicating. We are tearing out our hearts in the hopes that if we are the right kind of person, the right type of family, saying the right kind of thing, then maybe, just maybe, we will get the support to get our loved one back home. My brother is being held unjustly for crimes he has not committed. He is a useful pawn as far as the Russian authorities are concerned. They know he is not a spy and produced no evidence to show otherwise. But that has not set him free. He has a value, but not a high one. And he has 4 citizenships in total, a narrative twist that they hadn't expected. Still, those have not set him free either. It is Russia's fault that he is in prison. They are to blame. But we need the government to step up for a wronged citizen and get him back. So I did figure that I'd get a better reception than I did when I started to knock on doors in DC. I have to thank those brave souls who have and still are standing up and speaking out for Paul as anyone with a heart and soul should. And what about the others? The ones that don't return your calls, the ones who agree to meetings but don't show up, the ones who vow support but are never heard from again, the ones that disappear when you mention the country in which your loved one is held. There is no forum in which I can call these people out. That's not how the script reads. From the moment the Russians arrested Paul, they swept our family up in a drama of their making, a theater performance complete with a fake trial. And on this side of the Atlantic, the performance continues. There is pressure on hostage and detainee families to play the role of the heartsick family who sacrifices all for their loved one, with family appearance, morning shows, and occasional tears for the camera. And we do sacrifice all, but we feel the pain of these rejections. We take them personally for ourselves, but mostly for our loved ones who are trapped in a hostile foreign land and unable to plead their own case. Advocacy for a loved one is a bruising experience, and the feelings of betrayal are a silent and deep hurt we bear. I wake up in the morning, every morning, now for 800 plus days, with my stomach in a knot. I reach for my phone to find out what fresh hell is in store for me. I work for myself, but find that any schedule goes off the rails in an instant if my brother's case needs attention, if a reporter will talk to me, if there's an email I need to write. I am lucky to have 2 other brothers to share the load. But inside, I am screaming all the time, screaming in my heart, in my soul, for my youngest brother to come home, for those in power to use their leverage to get him out, for them to do the right thing, even if Russia won't, for them to care about the Russians spending the days of this man's life like dollars at a casino where the game is rigged and he will never get to cash out. Screaming inside for our elderly parents who are worried they will never see Paul again. Screaming as I try to unravel yet another complication, try to network with a new administration, try to say the right things to the right people at the right time on the right day, so that the planets will align and someone, somewhere, will start the process that will lead to my brother coming home. I cannot let these screams out. I cannot burden my own family with them. Each one of us is carrying more than we can bear. I cannot scream at Congress, at state, at the administration, or the NSC. I cannot yell at the media or friends or supporters or anyone. But I can turn to Hostage US, where friendly and caring people share my burden, walk alongside me, listen, and come back again to listen some more. When Paul was first arrested, we were sure that he would be out again in hours, then days. We were sure it would only be days. Then the weeks turned into months, and now a path of wrongful detention leads into the unknown. Ahead of us, dusty and worn out with our own burdens, other hostage and detainee families trudge along years into the distance. 4, 5, 10 years. We silently hope that Paul's case will not be the same, that he will be free soon, that the bent backs we see in front of us are not our future. Now the months are becoming years, and we hear behind us the footsteps of new families carrying the burden of their loved one, looking at our backs with that same dread. But if we look from side to side, we are not alone. Hostage US is a vital and irreplaceable part of each of our teams if we so choose. In those early days, I didn't think I would need their help. Now I don't know what I would do without it. And I know that when Paul returns, they will be there for him as well, walking with him as long as he would like. Thank you for allowing me to share a little of our experience with you. Please do what you can to support Hostage US for all of our sakes.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing your story. You and your family are truly remarkable. I want to remind you that we have a silent auction running from now until 9 p.m. Eastern Time. The information for bidding is in your email. Make a bid before 9, and you and a guest can fly anywhere in the US or Europe as the world begins to open again. I'm pleased to now introduce the feature interview with Judy Woodruff and David Rode. Judy is a broadcast journalist and the anchor and managing editor of the PBS NewsHour. David is the executive editor for news of NewYorker.com. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author, and former hostage held in Afghanistan for 7 months. We are excited to have you both join us, and we're excited to hear David's story.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. And David, I am really glad to see you and have this chance to talk to you again. So I think everybody knows the story, but remind us, why were you, it was late 2009, you were in Afghanistan. What were you doing? Where were you? What was going on?
So I was a reporter for the New York Times. I was actually working on a book project about the U.S. effort in Afghanistan. And as the kind of final piece of reporting for the book, I wanted to interview a Taliban commander. A local journalist, an Afghan journalist, had interviewed a Taliban commander several times before with European journalists, and he set up an interview for us. When we arrived for the interview, the commander kidnapped us. And that was the beginning of 7 months in captivity.
And tell us a little bit about what that was like. It's the fact that 7 months, that's a long time.
It was a long time, and frankly, it's gotten worse for current captives today, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But we were quickly moved from. We met him just outside of Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan. He smuggled us over the border into Pakistan, into the tribal areas, a part of that country where the Taliban sort of had safe havens, thanks to the Pakistani military. And we were held there for 7 months with the help of the Afghan journalist who worked with me. He helped me escape. It was a miracle. We were moved to a house that was very close to a Pakistani military base, and while our guards were asleep, we used a rope, tied it to a wall, lowered ourselves off the roof of this house, and then walked to this military base. We were almost shot by the Pakistani guards when we approached in the middle of the darkness, but we were led on the base, and I was incredibly lucky that Afghan journalist was so brave and saved my life.
Almost shot because the guard thought you were Taliban or something else.
Yeah, I had a beard from 7 months in captivity and was dressed in local clothes. They made us sort of take our shirts off. They thought we were maybe suicide bombers, but there was a young Pakistani lieutenant who trusted us, led us on the base, and let me call home. So I'm incredibly lucky.
And David, there was a lot of reporting in the aftermath about how this was kept quiet. So much of the news media around the world, especially in the United States, kept this, did not report on it, kept it quiet. But remind us, how were you treated during your time in captivity?
In the first few hours, we just assumed we were going to be executed. We were driven out in the middle of a field and blindfolded and tied up. And a clear pattern emerged right at that moment. The Afghans who worked with me, there was, as I mentioned, an Afghan journalist, and there was also an Afghan driver, were treated worse than me. They were beaten. They were considered traitors. Once we got into Pakistan, it just became, clear they were going to keep us alive and try to get the biggest price they could for us. They asked for $25 million in cash and the release of about a dozen prisoners from Guantanamo. There was a ransom offered by the New York Times. I won't talk about the amount. It was not millions of dollars. It was nowhere near what they wanted. But it was very clear that once they get a hostage into sort of safe haven like that, they can hold the hostage as long as they want. So again, the miracle was the bravery of that Afghan journalist, and that I was able to make it home. I probably would have been held much, much longer if that hadn't happened.
Yeah, it's hard, I think, for all of us to put ourselves in your shoes to imagine what that was like. But I'm assuming there were many, many moments when you didn't think you were going to be free.
Well, I'm very lucky. The New York Times was amazing. My family was amazing, but it's similar to be honest, sort of for people to relate to being diagnosed, I guess, with a fatal disease, being diagnosed with cancer. And that happens to people every day in every country. And you have to face your mortality. You have to accept that you don't control, whether you're going to live or die. And, it's amazing, the human mind, you come up with ways to cope. And we found ways to function day after day. And people do that when they face these kinds of diagnoses. So, again, I was lucky. And what's alarming now is that I think the nature of kidnappings and hostage taking has the challenge has sort of evolved and changed since in the decades since I was held.
It's so hard to believe 11 years ago. David, we want to talk about, what happened when you when you came home. What was it? I mean, what was it like? You'd been away for this time. People were so worried about you. What was it like when you got back? What happened?
First of all, it was thrilling. Everybody said to me, "It's like, oh my God, it must be such a strange or shocking experience." And I was like, "No, it's wonderful. I can eat what I want. I can frankly go to the bathroom when I want." So it was a relief at first, but um, it's sort of a double-edged sword. I mean, again, back to your previous question, folks are like, "Oh, you're so brave, and it's amazing you survived this." And other people are like, and I just want to be honest, you're an idiot. You never should have gone to that interview. I had a guy in a store who figured out who I was. He sort of berated me and told me that I should, pay back the American government. So it's a challenge. But what I found very quickly was that talking to former captives privately was incredibly helpful. And we would all sort of, say to each other that both of those extremes, we were neither sort of brave heroes or, idiots. Frankly, we were victims of bad luck. In these cases, there are times when people do reckless things and they get kidnapped, but in many other cases, people do the right thing and they're just the victim of bad luck. And it's very clear to me that the people who need to be blamed the most are the perpetrators, the groups, the insurgents, and the governments who take innocent people captive and hold them, for political and financial gain. Gain that is outrageous. That is wrong, and that's where I think our anger should be focused.
No question. Talk a little bit though, David, about what it was like for you personally coming. I mean, in terms of family, close friends, your work colleagues. How is that getting reacclimated after this?
You're doing a good job in that I prefer to talk about broad policy issues. Look, I had to rebuild my career. I had just gotten married. I'd only been married for a couple months when I was kidnapped. I had been overly ambitious. I regret and will always regret going to that interview. I nearly got these two Afghans killed. The driver, who did not join our escape attempt, we had talked to him about escaping, and he had told the guards in the past, so we went on our own. He was eventually freed, but I stopped being a foreign correspondent. I haven't been back to Afghanistan since. I haven't covered a conflict since then. I've become an investigative reporter and an editor, and there are times when I miss foreign correspondence. So it's hard. It's a big. In the short term, you're relieved. The attention is sort of overwhelming at first, and then it's like, how do I? Where do I go from here? What do I make of my life? And you're a crime victim. I did not do anything wrong. I went to hear this commander's thoughts and views, and so it's a transition. But again, having others you can talk to who've been through the experience was an enormous help to me.
So that brings us to Hostage US. I mean, this is an organization, as we know, that didn't exist when you were a captive and when you were released. You know it very well. What kind of differences could it have made for you, do you think?
It very much would have it helped me, and it was fun helping get it started. It's continued to help me in that I've worked. I now am a person who returning hostages can talk to. We've all become very close friends. Actually, there's a small sort of circle of us. When Jason Rezaian came back from Iran, I had never met him and I'd only read about him in the news, but I was the guy who was sort of a year ahead of him in terms of what it's like to come home. I think actually 2 or 3 years ahead of him, and how you acclimate. That it's normal to feel really strange when you get home, and control is a big issue. You've lost all control, so when you're home, you can be short-tempered or sort of a little paranoid about controlling what's going to happen to you, and so that really helped. Most importantly, Hostage US helps families. A loved one is kidnapped. What do you do? What if the kidnappers contact you? What happens when the FBI and other government agencies contact you? You're asked, do you want the US military to carry out a raid if they have some information about your loved one? And it turns out for these families, there are many other families that have been through this already. They understand how the US government system works and doesn't work, and they can give them really valuable practical advice about how to try to bring someone home.
What does a former hostage need when he or she is released?
I would say, the family support, the family's forgiveness. My wife, who, as I said, it only been 2 months, was incredibly forgiving for me, my family. I had been detained for 10 days years earlier, about another decade earlier, covering the war in Bosnia, and promised my family that it wouldn't happen again, and it did in Afghanistan. There was a good 11 years stretch there. And that helped. My employer was great in terms of helping me readjust and find a new path, because I just was not going to cover conflict anymore. And helping me, the New York Times was wonderful about that. So and then counseling. I had a counselor I'd seen before, and that helped me enormously. So it takes time. There's a big moment is when you've been out as long as you were held captive. And what's so discouraging is that these captivities now are much longer. Mine was 7 months. You now have people being held, for years and years at a time, and so their recovery will take that much longer.
And what is the former hostage's family need in that time?
So while the hostage is gone, it can put a tremendous financial stress on a family if the captive is the primary wage earner. Are they going to get that? Jason Rezaian, I mentioned earlier, had his credit destroyed while he was in captivity. We had these hilarious phone conversations about him calling up, the operator at these credit agencies and saying, Google my name, I'm Jason Rezaian, and I couldn't pay that bill, and my family couldn't access all these accounts, to pay my credit card, and it was an enormous challenge to him. But mostly, and this is the kind of cruelest thing for the family, is that there's a feeling the family has that back to the cancer diagnosis, their loved one is facing death. Their loved one could die. And in a kidnapping case, the family thinks if they just say the right thing to the kidnappers, to that government, to the insurgents, they can, save the lives of their loved one who have that power. And they really don't. Often resolving these cases involves pressure from the U.S. government. Again, insurgents want captives or millions of dollars. And so it's vital that they know how to talk to the U.S. government. They know how to be gentle on themselves about what they can actually achieve. But it's an incredibly cruel crime for a family. Crueler, I think, in some ways for the family than for the hostage.
Again, unimaginable, because you're right. I mean, the worry, you naturally are worried about the very worst thing every moment of every waking moment of your days. And I know, David, I mean, so many of the hostages we think about have been journalists. Of course, there are hostages taken who work for other employers. How much, but specifically with regard to journalists, how much does it matter whether that journalist is connected to a big news organization like the New York Times, or whether they're a freelancer?
It matters a lot. And then you mentioned earlier the New York Times sort of, keeping my story quiet. Again, how hostage taking has evolved. 11 years ago, there was a belief that if you kept a case quiet, that would somehow bring down crazy demands that insurgents or kidnappers often make. My case was kept quiet, and it didn't make any difference. The demands just stayed high anyway. What's changed, and this also in NewsHour, hats off to you and Sarah Just, your executive producer, who's an old colleague of mine. You're still doing foreign coverage, but what's happened in general in journalism is that there's fewer outlets that can afford to carry out foreign coverage, and they just take pieces from freelancers. And for the family of a freelancer that gets kidnapped, it's an enormous challenge. They don't have the support of the New York Times. They're not sure what to do. And that's why it's very important for Hostage US to help them. The family of James Foley, he was a freelancer when he was kidnapped and then murdered in Syria. The Foley Foundation, which they created in his honor, also helps advocate for families. And it's the real dire circumstance, again, of a freelancer with few resources being kidnapped is one of the biggest challenges today.
Is there anything to say, David, about, I mean, there's so much more to explore on every point you're making. Is there anything more to be said, though, about hostages who are not journalists, who whose employer may not, just may not be expecting or equipped or anything close to deal with something like this?
Yeah, and I think a lot of those cases were kept secret in the past, and the families don't know what to do. But I think the nature of kidnapping has changed. More governments are kidnapping people, so you see many sort of academics, contractors. Iran has really mastered this model. They're seizing dual nationals who have both Iranian and American passports, assuming, frankly, that there's less sympathy maybe for immigrants in the United States, which is, I think, something this country should face and not accept. Russia is sort of doing the same thing with dual passport holders in China as well. And so it's really important that Hostage US and any organization exists to help freelance journalists and the families of contractors who don't know where to turn, don't know how to pressure, the federal government, the White House, who to approach in Congress. And Hostage US does a remarkable job of sort of doing that very quietly behind the scenes, very discreetly, and giving them support, but respecting the family's desire. The current number of hostages, this is a public tally by the Foley Foundation, which is, they're very public in their advocacy, is 48. There are many, or at least several other secret cases that Hostage US is working on privately that the family have asked to be kept secret. And Hostage US honors that, and the discretion that Hostage US provides, combined with support, is just invaluable.
Talk a little bit about the connection between Hostage US and the different governments who get involved. What is that relationship like? We know Hostage US is not involved in the actual negotiations, but explain how this all works.
Representatives of Hostage US can go with a family to some, if not most, of their meetings with U.S. government officials. And the Hostage US representative tells them, what's going to happen, what questions you're going to be asked, the kind of decisions you need to make beforehand about what you want the government to do in your case. And Hostage US keeps all that very private. So that gains the trust of U.S. government officials. There was a whole sort of new system, a special envoy for hostage affairs that was created under the Obama administration. The Trump administration, to their credit, kept that office in place. It was one of the few Obama initiatives that the Trump administration did not dismantle. And then the Trump administration was very aggressive in trying to bring hostages home. They did a lot of work, particularly National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien. And since Hostage US now has worked with both administrations, they're just really adept at helping families. But again, they're trusted by key government policymakers to help families and help the government resolve these cases. So it's just amazing how, sadly, the need has grown, but it's amazing how this whole system has emerged to help families and hostages.
Is there more? Is it fair to say there's more continuity or more shared knowledge, shared experience in dealing with hostage situations today because there's more of an infrastructure around this, because you have Hostage US, because you have a specific office in the US government? And I don't know about other countries, but is it somewhat more organized when there's a hostage taking? What would you say?
I think there is more organization. Other speakers, families with current hostages can speak about this more effectively than I can. So I think there's a little better support. The families are somewhat less isolated, but resolving these cases is just as hard. Getting the Iranian government, the Russian government, the Chinese government to release a captive, they want their pound of flesh. They want to get whatever they want out of the U.S. government, and then the U.S. government, doesn't want to incentivize further kidnappings by immediately, achieve, just giving up and giving in to demand. So it's a really fraught process. And again, I think the lengths of cases have increased. I was lucky that it was 7 months. Most people, particularly ones held by government, are now being held for years at a time. And let me just say, it is absolutely outrageous and unacceptable that governments are doing this. There's no excuse for it. They're fake espionage charges brought against people that are, working as journalists or researchers or academics. They're just doing their jobs in countries. It's utterly unacceptable.
Unacceptable. In terms of I know it's early in this new Biden administration, but is there a sense at this early point, just a few months in, what their approach will be? Will it be different from the Trump and the Obama administrations? What is your sense of that?
They've kept in place the special envoy for hostage affairs that was brought in by the Trump administration. I think that's a good move. That's a great sign of continuity and a commitment to this issue. But to be blunt, there needs to be, serious engagement from Secretary of State Blinken, since the problem is now involving foreign governments. The White House itself also has to engage. This isn't an issue where just like the military is going to carry out a raid or an insurgent group. The trend is that governments now think this is a strategy that works. So I'd like to see more of a signal from the Biden administration that top administration officials are going to engage in this to me, this really important and growing problem.
You mean a signal from the Secretary of State or the President? You mean at that level?
Yes. I mean, there was criticism. I mean, President Trump would bring folks home and bring them into the Oval Office or do photo ops. And you can question. Some people said they didn't like that how that appeared and seemed, but he was engaging personally in these cases. I'm not saying that President Biden has to publicly, personally engage in these cases, but senior policymakers at the White House, Secretary Blinken, should be talking to families and hearing them out and making the release of hostages an important thing on Americans' foreign policy agenda. That doesn't have to be public, but they can certainly work on these issues in private and demand that these people, these innocent people, get released.
David, if you could wave a magic wand and have whatever resources or policy changes that were needed to make the work of Hostage US as effective as it could possibly be, what changes, what additions, what resources would you like to see?
I think there's need for folks to support Hostage US. I think it's important that Hostage US have independent support. It doesn't want to be funded by the government and somehow be indebted to any government. And so I'm eager that people support Hostage US. And I'd say the biggest policy question would be a clearer and more unified policy approach to kidnapping by the U.S. And other sort of liberal democracies, Europe, Japan. What happened when when I was taken captive was that there were European governments that were paying ransoms to insurgent groups, to Islamist organizations, and that just encouraged further kidnapping. The United States does not pay ransoms. The government does not pay ransoms. Families have tried to pay ransoms on their own in the past, but they can only come up with small amounts of money. So a unified policy among democracies, would help. I think deter kidnapping in the long term. That's a very ambitious thing. That's the magic wand. So a broad joint initiative by the U.S. and its allies around the world, pushing back on kidnapping by insurgents, the state kidnappings by countries like Iran, Russia, and China would be perfect if I could wave a magic wand.
And complicated because these are countries with which the U.S. already has difficult, complicated relations. But it's something. It is something to think about and that deserves more attention. No question about it. David, thank you very much. Such an important and interesting conversation. It's so good to get your perspective. Thank you.
David, your resilience and that of your family is so powerful. You continue to be a resource to hostage families and returnees. You continue to work to improve the safety and security of journalists who travel to remote and dangerous regions to give voice to the silenced. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Amy Manson, and I'm a founding board member, a current executive board member, the chair of the Hostage US Family Support Committee, and most importantly, a member of the family support team. This group of gifted and dedicated volunteers are our delivery system to hostage and detainee families. We help families navigate uncharted waters, and we signpost them to services and resources, many from our wonderful pro bono partners. Family support volunteers know firsthand the impact of the dollars donated by people like you. The organization has low overhead and high impact value. Examples of the judicious, dare I say frugal, use of donations include covering the operating costs of the organization, staff salaries, training our volunteers, and bringing them together for capacity building, continuing education, mental health evaluations. Our 24-hour helpline exists to ensure people making an inquiry or seeking help is connected to a team member. An encrypted cloud platform protects the confidentiality of our records and our family information. Conceptualizing, researching, developing, and publishing resource guides for our family and returning hostages. Maintaining a robust website and social media presence to educate the public and disseminate information. I'd like to bring this evening's event to a close, focusing on the value of the work we do. Value infers merit, worth, usefulness, helpfulness, and significance. The work done by Hostage US, and specifically our family support volunteers, are a beacon to light the way forward and provide hope to hostage families. To do this work, we need consistent and generous financial support from donors, as well as the generosity of our pro bono service partners. I want to share a story with you about a family we have been supporting since 2017. Robert was a tradesman by profession. He cashed in his life savings. He bought a sailboat he named her Renova and sailed her across the ocean to live out his retirement with the woman he loved. We can all see Robert sailing into the setting sun. He planned meticulously for this adventure. He drew up a power of attorney. He bought a sat phone. He scheduled check-ins and selected a safe harbor marina with security, far from where pirates ply the waters. Nothing, however, could have prepared his family for the dark night in September 2015, when he and others were kidnapped by extremist terrorists. Stop for a moment and imagine your anguish and terror learning that your father, your brother, your spouse, your loved one is ripped from your life to face a literal sea of fear. Fear for their safety, their basic needs. For Robert's children and his siblings, they didn't know if he was alive, if he was injured, where he slept, if he was hungry. An exorbitant ransom demand was made by his captors, a number that was so high it smashed the family's hope for a possible release. After 9 months of living hell, Robert was murdered by his captors, and his family was left in the tumultuous wake of the aftermath. They came to Hostage US days before a robust agenda of meetings with government officials to seek answers and resolution. We prepared and accompanied the siblings through a process seeking restorative justice and crafting Robert's legacy. We worked to have Renova appraised and sold to close Robert's estate. We mediated meetings with law enforcement. We escorted one of the siblings at the final stage of her life, providing advocacy for her choice to leave the world on her own terms. We worked with Hostage International in bringing Robert's partner out of danger and through the asylum process to safety from retribution and to a new life. Through the generosity of our pro bono partners, we most recently provided media training to allow the family to tell the new narrative about life after their brother's murder. They are now helping other families face the abyss. The journey has been difficult. There have been twists and turns, moments of immense sadness, but also moments when the thin line of the horizon meets us and hope shines bright. Hostage US has been a constant light in their lives. Robert's family has taught us it's an endless journey. It is multi-generational. Hostage US provides guidance and services that light the dark waters. Tonight, I ask you to financially support Hostage US so we can continue to do good work. And I appeal to you to consider increasing your gift and to invite others to join our circle of light and hope. On behalf of the Board of Directors of Hostage US, our staff, volunteers, and partners, we'd like to thank you for joining us this evening. Good night.